Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a role that's absolutely vital in pretty much any organization, but maybe one you don't always see front and center, the benefits administrator.
It's a really key position,
Yeah.
and it involves navigating what our source material for this deep dive calls the intricacies of employee benefits.
Intricacies is a good word for it.
Yeah, think healthcare, retirement plans, time off, all that stuff. That's just crucial to employees' lives.
Exactly. And, well, our mission today is to cut right to the chase. We're using this specific guide from Kaplan,
Okay.
focusing on the key interview questions for this role. The idea is to quickly get a handle on what really matters in benefits administration.
Right. So whether you're maybe looking for a job like this yourself, or perhaps you're hiring for one,
Or just curious.
or just curious about how this, frankly, complex world gets managed, this deep dive should give you a pretty rapid understanding of the core demands.
Yeah, and this guide, it sets the stage well. It describes the role as needing, and I'm quoting here, a unique blend of expertise, communication skills, and attention to detail.
Uh-huh. That blend sounds right.
It really hammers home that you're dealing with complexity, serious complexity.
And, probably the best way to really understand what a job's truly about.
How's that?
Look at what people hiring for it actually ask. This Kaplan guide lays out 6 questions they see as the most common, the most crucial.
Okay, so let's do that. Let's dive into each one and sort of uncover what it reveals about being great at this job.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, let's unpack this. First up, they start pretty fundamental, which makes sense. Can you describe your experience with administering employee benefits?
Yeah, seems obvious, right? Just asking about your history.
Pretty straightforward on the surface.
But it's digging deeper, I think. It's
Yeah.
really probing for, depth and breadth, not just a simple checklist.
Oh.
The Kaplan Guide actually emphasizes that strong candidates will show several years of experience. They need to prove they're well-versed in the rules and regulations and that they have a solid grip on how to design and implement benefit plans.
So it's more than just processing forms.
Exactly. They're looking beyond just, pushing paper. They want to see you understand the whole life cycle of benefits and that you've actually navigated that complexity in practice.
That makes sense. You definitely need that solid foundation, which, well, it leads pretty directly into question 2, doesn't it?
It does.
How do you stay current on changes in laws and regulations related to employee benefits? Compliance feels like the absolute bedrock here.
Oh, absolutely. It's non-negotiable. The source we're looking at specifically calls out compliance and regulatory knowledge as a key requirement.
Right.
So this question, it's all about proving you take that constantly changing legal landscape seriously. You have to.
So what kind of answers are they looking for?
Well, the guide suggests answers that involve active steps. Things like regularly reading industry publications.
Okay, staying informed.
Right, and attending relevant conferences and seminars, plus participating in continuing education courses.
So proactive learning.
Exactly. It really highlights that this isn't a field where you learn it once and you're set. The rules are always evolving, and you have to be constantly learning, constantly updating.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Moving to the sort of practical application of those rules and all that expertise. Question 3. How do you ensure that employee benefits are being administered fairly and consistently? This feels so crucial for employee trust.
It really is. Consistency is absolutely key. For equity, sure, but also for avoiding legal headaches down the line.
Makes sense.
And the guide points towards having, structured processes for this. Their suggested answer includes things like regularly reviewing and updating policies and procedures,
Okay, keeping things current.
making sure staff are trained on these policies,
Yeah.
and crucially, conducting audits to ensure compliance.
Audits, like checking the work.
Yeah, exactly. This isn't just about having good intentions. It's about having systematic checks built in. Maybe auditing benefit enrollments or checking deduction calculations, just to catch errors and make absolutely sure everyone's being treated according to the established rules.
Right. But even with the best systems, things will still go wrong sometimes, right? Issues will pop up.
Inevitably.
So, question 4 tackles this head on. How do you handle employee complaints or issues related to their benefits?
Yeah, and this question, it really taps into both the technical know-how and what the guide calls problem-solving capabilities and interpersonal skills.
The people side.
Definitely. It's not enough just to know the rules. You need to apply them while helping someone who might be, confused or frustrated.
So what's the suggested approach?
The guy outlines a pretty clear process. First, listening carefully to the employee's concerns, really hearing them out.
Okay, empathy first.
Then researching the issue thoroughly, digging into the facts, and finally, working with the employee and other stakeholders, maybe payroll or a vendor, to find a fair and equitable resolution.
So listen, investigate, collaborate.
Pretty much. It emphasizes active listening, proper investigation, and working together to navigate those sometimes tricky personal situations.
And navigating those complex issues definitely requires clear communication. Which brings us neatly to question 5. How do you communicate changes or updates to employee benefits?
Uh-huh.
This feels absolutely critical. If employees don't understand their benefits, what's the point?
Totally. And it's mentioned explicitly in the source as needing strong communication skills. Getting complex benefit info across clearly is just a huge part of the job.
So how do they suggest doing that effectively?
Well, the suggested approach in the guide focuses on making the information accessible, using things like creating clear and concise communications, such as emails, newsletters, and meetings. The key goal, it says, is to ensure that all employees are informed and understand the changes.
So taking technical jargon and making it understandable.
Exactly. Translating those often complex details into plain language everyone can actually grasp.
Okay, makes sense. Finally, question 6. This one seems to take us beyond the day-to-day tasks and more into assessment. How do you evaluate the effectiveness of employee benefit plans?
Right. This looks at the more strategic impact.
So it's not just about running the plans, but figuring out if they're working.
Precisely. This is where the role really goes beyond just administration and starts informing future strategy. The guide suggests evaluating effectiveness through a few different means.
Like what?
Well, like gathering feedback from employees, which is vital, right? So you need to understand satisfaction and how people perceive the value.
Sure.
They also mention analyzing data on participation and usage. So looking at who's using which benefits and how often.
Using the numbers.
Yep. And finally, comparing the plans to industry standards and best practices, seeing how your offerings stack up externally.
So it demonstrates an ability to measure the impact and look for ways to improve things.
Exactly. Continuous improvement. Are the plans meeting their goals? How do they compare?
Okay. So looking across these 6 questions we've got experience, staying current, ensuring consistency, handling problems, communicating clearly, and evaluating effectiveness. You really do get a comprehensive picture of the skills this role demands. It's quite a lot.
It is. And what's striking, I think, is how these questions don't just ask if you know the rules. They ask how you operate within that whole framework.
How you actually do the job.
Right. How you manage processes, how you solve problems with people, how you think strategically about the impact of the benefits. It lines up perfectly with what the guide said right at the start.
That unique blend.
That unique blend of technical knowledge and interpersonal skills. You need both.
And this Kaplan material, it also gives you a bit more context, doesn't it? Showing where this role kind of fits into the wider world.
Yeah, it does. It lists several related job titles. Things like benefits analysts, consultant coordinator, specialist.
Lots of benefits titles.
And various compensation roles, too.
Yeah.
Analyst, consultant, coordinator, expert, specialist. Plus contract specialist and employee benefits specialist.
So it really highlights that benefits administration isn't like an island.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's deeply interconnected with compensation, with other HR functions, all part of building that total employee package.
And it also points to some practical resources tied to their career center, right? Like an interview coach and an offer analyzer.
Which brings it right back down to earth, grounding it in the practical application.
How so?
Well, these tools are clearly there to help people actually navigate the hiring process, elevate your interviews, as they say, and understand their market value, evaluate your offer. It just reinforces that understanding these core assessment points, the things interviewers are looking for, is directly useful, whether you're the one aiming for the role or the one trying to fill it.
So by deep diving into this Kaplan guide on these specific interview questions, we've pretty quickly mapped out the essential competencies for a benefits administrator.
Yeah, it paints a clear picture.
It's definitely a role requiring some serious expertise, real diligence, and, well, strong people skills too.
Absolutely. And knowing what hiring experts look for through these kinds of targeted questions, it provides real clarity on what defines success in benefits administration. It's far more than just paperwork.
Much more.
It's really about managing crucial aspects of people's well-being, their financial lives.
Yeah, which leads to a final thought, maybe. Given how critical employee benefits are, for people's health, their security, their whole relationship with their employer.
They're fundamental.
What does the depth and complexity highlighted by just these 6 interview questions suggest about the quiet yet absolutely fundamental trust we place in the person managing it all?
That's a great point.
It's a huge responsibility, often unseen, but it really goes deep.